In this episode of IDP Drafts, we're going to be doing an IDP draft. More specifically, we are going to be drafting with some of the best ball drafters out there, some of the folks from our home leagues that we know are particularly sharp and on top of things. And we're going to be testing out a bit of a new format that we're excited about, looking at combined offense and IDP with a little bit less rounds than we've been doing before to make it a little bit more exciting. So draft with us, see what we do, and let's enjoy the ride together. Welcome to IDP Drafts. All right, Jake, how you doing? It's almost the 4th of July. I'm hopeful that people are going to be listening to this while they're grilling and doing whatever else you might want to do on the 4th of July or the 3rd. I know your big party is tomorrow.
That's right.
We're hosting for our neighborhood on the 4th. How you doing, my man?
Doing great. We were talking about beforehand, everything's going well. We've got lots of prep for the party, excited to have the party. But the most important thing is I'm excited to do a live draft with you tonight. This is the first one for us this season. Probably won't be the last, but this is a great one. I am so pumped to talk about this format. A beautiful little brainchild you gave birth to here for us. I'm pumped, sir. I love everything we got going for us tonight.
Nice. So if you've been following along, we've done a couple of these combined drafts already. The IDP show family in general does a lot of drafts so that we can build out great ADP to help you not just in best ball, but in your redraft leagues. And if you're a win now dynasty team, getting a sense of current valuations. But one of the things that Jake and I noticed is a 32 round draft can feel like a bit of a slog at the end. So we decided to give the combined leagues a little bit of a facelift. Jake, do you want to tell the folks about the specific league that we're doing tonight and the ones that we're going to be launching more of moving forward this summer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, kudos to you, sir. This is a beautiful thing that you came up here with for this. You really took, the best of what has been the IDP show best ball that they've been putting on for several years now, and really have been honing and crafting in here. But then you also looked at things that are successful, like our friends over at Fast Draft, right? Kind of how they've narrowed it down and made it much more versatile, right? It's not so position heavy requirements and things like that. And what we ended up with was a really beautiful thing, I think, in terms of these combined best balls that we've done. Extreme positional flexibility, right? On the offensive side of the ball, there's only one required position, a single position, and that's the running back, right? Otherwise, when you look outside of that, three full flexes between, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Specifically, just one single receiving flex, wide receiver, tight end. That's an area where there's generally a lot more depth, especially to attack overall in terms of how NFL offenses operate. So it's nice to have that. And then the really kind of the cream on the top of all of that is a singular super flex position, right? And so now it's like these high-end quarterbacks that can really separate themselves with rushing and passing volume. They have a place in all this too, to be an elite contributor for us as well. Now we flip it over to the defensive side, really more of the same, right? We do have that singular position requirement across defensive line, linebacker, and defensive back, but they're all so deep, right? I mean, defensive line, you have interior and edge mixed together. Defensive back, you got safety, cornerback mixed together. It's a great format where then you look on top of that, you got three full flexes, and on the IDP side, very short benches, very short in terms of what you were just talking about, right? What do we got? We got 5 total bench spots. So it may seem like, oh, you're so used to having one bench for every position that you're starting. Well, again, with the flexibility that's created by all of these positions, the full IDP flex, the super flex, only one starting, singular position on offense and running back. Everybody can flex all over the place. It's beautiful. It's very versatile, easy to get into. I'm like I said, I'm having fun already, and we're only through the first 5 rounds. So,
The other thing that I really like about it is this idea that there are going to be so many different kinds of builds. Like you mentioned, the reason we opted not to have a dedicated quarterback slot is pretty much everyone's going to feel locked into drafting 2 quarterbacks. So that way you have one for, that you plan on banking on and one to be your bye week quarterback. And when you're only having 6 bench spots, because we have 12 starters, 6 bench, making everyone already use one of those for a second quarterback just didn't make much sense to us. So having that be super flex instead of a QB required, you might see some 0 QB teams. That's going to be fun to see. You might see a lot of different builds in terms of, teams wanting to have more of those bench spots dedicated to IDP versus offense. And it's going to depend on who you draft and when you draft and where you draft, because you only have, like I said, 6 of those bench spots. So it's going to be really fun. I'm hopeful, since these are going to be shorter. What we're doing tonight, as Jake mentioned, we've done 5 rounds as sort of a slow draft with a 2-hour timer paused overnight like we normally do. But we told everyone, hey, show up. We're going to be turning it down to 2 minutes, and we're going to knock out a few rounds tonight. So I know they're waiting eagerly to get back into the draft. I know the person that was picking at 5:12 was like, why can't we just keep going? I was like, because we need to save some stuff. So let me share the draft board. And Jake, just some, we both are in this. I am in the 1 spot, completely random. I swear I would not have picked the 1 spot if I could have. Jake is in the 7. Part of the reason why we wanted to get a couple of rounds done ahead of time is if you're looking at the board, you see no IDP coloration yet. There have been no pure IDP drafted just yet. I'm picking out of the 101 slot. I've gone pretty running back heavy so far. We've seen some teams that have got that quarterback, specifically 2 teams in that front end. Jake, I know you took Burrow because you just wanted to hurt me. My good friend Chris was having sleeper issues, and since there is a super flex spot in this, Sleeper thinks it's a super flex league and uses super flex rankings. So he got auto drafted 2 quarterbacks, but he's set now. I mean, he's got just elite scoring out of that spot, and 1 less headache to worry about with his bench, because now he only has 5 decisions to make. But it's been a pretty vanilla offense only draft to this point, but we're getting into the part of the draft where it's going to be decision time. Who's going to break that IDP seal? But Jake, I know in your second half, there was an IDP taken. So I'll let you mention where that was before we go ahead and resume the draft.
Yes, the illustrious offense defense player that we've all come to covet and be excited about this year. Travis Hunter went at the 112. And honestly, feels like a pretty good spot for him, given, the potential upside that he does house there. But that said, that was our lone IDP with the dual Desi wide receiver, defensive back connotation for him. So, yeah, I mean, you look on the second half of the teams here, very heavy wide receiver focused. Some teams opting for a little bit heavier running back approach, but it's mostly been, hey, let's get those wide receivers, because we got all kinds of wide receiver flexibility built across these rosters. And there's plenty of wide receiver talent to go around.
Yeah, and I saw you did take Trey McBride. So even though you mentioned there's no required tight end spot, and that's partly because we wanted to have that symmetry of 6 offense and 6 IDP, but we also wanted to have a lot of flexibility. And if you say, 1 QB, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 1 wide receiver, then you only have 2 flex spots.
Right.
So that's why we opted for that receiver flex, where it's wide receiver or tight end, running back dedicated, super flex, and then, like you mentioned, the other flexes. So you can have teams that have as many as 5 starting wide receivers or tight ends. That'd be a pretty crazy build if it's all tight ends, but you never know. It's like I said, we've got a sharp group of drafters, but we have some folks who also love to think outside of the box and do some interesting things in their drafts. So Jake, any other observations or things that you wanted to, so tell me a little bit about McBride, in a non-tight end required league. It's curious to see. And I know he was the second because we had Metal Dave take Brock Bowers in the second.
Yep.
But what made you decide to pull the trigger on McBride there over, I see Higgins, AJ Brown. Oh, no, they went right before. Lad McConkey, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison. Just a little bit about McBride.
Yeah, for me, I mean, he was, in my opinion, the clear number 1 option for Kyler Murray last year. You got to even figure if the number of catches regresses for him, the number of touchdowns will likely regress as well to the positive for him. I think he had 1 receiving touchdown or 1 rushing touchdown and a fumble recovery touchdown last year. So, I mean, the ceiling should only be up for McBride in terms of that. He was a clear number 1 option in his offense. I feel very good about him being able to give me 90 catches, 950 yards, and hopefully in that 4 to 6 touchdown range. When I look at the other guys behind that, Ladd and Garrett were guys that were in my queue that could maybe do that. the floor just felt really good with McBride, and I felt like I wanted to kind of lock that kind of floor in. I do also have to comment, you actually nailed it perfectly. I did take Burrow because he was the last of my elite quarterback options where I was like, I'm going to do that. And you and Josh both had Higgins and Chase, and I very much wanted to block your stacks. So I absolutely did do that to take care of you two.
Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate how you're always looking out for me. That's the mark of a true friend right there. All right. Well, it looks like almost everyone has the green dot. The drafters are eagerly awaiting the resumption of the draft. So I'm going to go ahead and hit resume. And like I said, we'll do about 4 of these. Jake and I'll give you our reactions to the picks in real time. And yeah, let's see what happens.
The magical sound, it has begun. So I
Mhm.
right away, Scott, right? Like you alluded to this, like as one of the questions and one of the points of this draft and being able to go through it is, when does that seal get broken for IDP? I mean, when you're looking at this format, is that something where you're thinking, hey, I'm gonna fill out my primary offensive spot so I feel good and locked in for my guys who are gonna deliver every week offensively and then go defense? Is there a certain point where you're like, hey, and this kind of short bench flexibility, I want to have the elite of the elite defenses. I'm going to try to reach a little earlier. I obviously, don't tip. You don't have to tip your hand here too much.
Yeah, I was gonna say this feels
But
a little bit like you trying to get a competitive edge. I will say that I am historically a draft all my offense and even some of my offensive backups before dipping into the IDP pool. But in a format like this, if I get some locked and loaded IDP studs, then I'm going to be able to use more of that short bench on offensive players. And it there's multiple strategies that could play out. So I don't know that I want to be that person who breaks the seal fully. I mean, Travis Hunter's gone, so we kind of have an IDP out there, but it's a little bit different, like I said, in this format, and it allows for some different things. All right, so we have our first pick in. Unfortunately, it was an auto pick, but it was Patrick Mahomes. He had no quarterback, so I don't think he can be too upset about that, and he'll have a good 24 minutes to come back on the clock and make a pick here live in a bit. I know that as a Texans fan, you might not have any particular love or hate for Mahomes like most of the league, like Bengals fans do, and I know that's your secondary. What do you think of the Mahomes pick, and then DeAndre Swift right after him?
yeah, Mahomes has done enough to hurt the Texans at times, right? Especially this last season in the playoffs. I thought they actually had a chance there, but fan bias and hopefulness there. But yeah, I think the Mahomes pick is a solid one. It feels like they've tooled up enough of their offense that he should be much more fantasy relevant for us this year. I still don't think we should be getting back to the point where it's like, hey, 5,000 yards or 50 touchdowns type things. That's really not in the range of outcomes. The way the NFL defenses are playing nowadays, the focus on, starting in what appears to be a too high type of coverage or a shell coverage type of approach, and then, defenses shifting right before snap or right after snap. Teams just aren't able to attack downfield the way he was. And obviously, prime Tyreek is Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy and Juju Smith and Hollywood never are going to combine to make that either. So,
Yeah,
he's a good floor play for this year, I think.
yeah.
And he'll be good for this format, but I think you definitely want to limit upside.
Yeah, you mentioned this format. I think he's one of those guys where if you take him, then it almost eliminates the need to take a second quarterback. I
Yes.
feel like the 2 quarterback builds are either like 2 super. I know it was unintentional when Chris got auto drafted those guys, but I think that might end up actually being a kind of decent strategy because you're guaranteed to have a ton of points out of that spot every single week. But more generally speaking, I think if you get one of those elite guys, like you don't have to tip your hand too much. But I don't see a whole lot of other quarterbacks being taken by the guys who have a Burrow or Hurts or one of those other tops.
I mean, you can account for this. I'll tell you straight out. Like, yeah, I'm not looking at taking another quarterback. Burrow's had some injury history, so it definitely crossed my mind from that perspective. But I also think that it's just too much for me for this format, right? I would much rather give myself another either elite defensive lineman or linebacker option, or if I can somehow, find some value that drops receiving wise to pull that in. But yeah, no, I think to me, and it was Burrow. Like that was
The last
obviously,
of the tier.
yeah, Josh Allen, Lamar, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. I think that's a pretty strong consensus top four.
Mhm.
Burrow sneaks into that top five for me just based on I don't know that they've done enough with their defense to not have that offense be what powers them, right? So
Yeah.
I think we're looking at another strong year for Burrow.
So you're almost on the clock, so I'll let you stop talking for a minute, and I'll filibuster about some of the other picks that have happened since we've gone live. We had DeAndre Swift, running back out of Chicago. I love that pick. He's one of the few, presumably bell cow running backs that are left in the draft pool. It's part of the reason why I took James Conner in the fifth, because I like to have those steady points. So getting those guys is something that is really attractive to me. And so Swift, I think, makes a lot of sense. Tony Pollard right after him, on a team that had previously drafted Caleb Johnson, who we all think is going to be great as a rookie, but he's still a rookie. So I think having Pollard there is a nice balance. Jordan Addison, Bo Nix, and then you just took Aaron Jones. Tell us about your decision.
Yeah, this was something for me where he was the last of a tier for me in terms of running backs. I want to have two running backs to fill out my locked and required running back position on the offensive side. And having Devon Achane and Aaron Jones there makes me feel good enough. Maybe it's a little fragile, right? Two guys that have dealt with some injuries here over the last 2 years. And Aaron Jones just had his largest workload this last season. But to me, those are two guys that, hey, if I don't have to pick between putting one of them in my running back spot every week, I think there's a good chance that I'm going to find a way to consistently deliver high value in my running back spot between those two now.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I built a mini queue for tonight, so I wouldn't have to scramble too much while we're also trying to talk. And Jones was the last running back that was in my mini queue. I had Pollard on there, I had Swift on there, so he was you talked about last of a tier. He was last of a tier there for me.
That's
I also
hilarious.
love.
I had the same Swift, Pollard, and Jones. We're all so we're in lockstep there, good sir. I love it.
Nice. So the other thing, I really don't like being on the end here, because if there ends up being an IDP run, that's always something that is going to be alarming to me, especially in this crowd. I know everyone's going to have a decent IDP squad because you only start 6. You're probably only going to be rostering between 8 and 10 or 11 in total. So there's going to be value there, but I can tell you I'm starting to sweat a little bit thinking about what's going to come, because this is the 6th round and you have 6 offensive starters.
Yep.
And that's often when people start to dip a toe in that water. So I'll be interested to see if someone goes that direction now, and if not, if I'm the one who ends up breaking that, because it might be too difficult to pass up.
So I'm looking at my also mini queue, right? I did the same thing, and I'm just thinking this is probably going to dry up, or I might have one last shot at a receiving option that I'm comfortable with taking there. But there's a really good chance if that seal ain't broken by you or anyone immediately after you, that 707 spot is very likely going to be that's going to be me picking IDP right there.
We just had Sam Laporta go. I like the Laporta pick. He is another one of those 1B options on a team, behind Amon-Ra in a very high-powered offense. So I think there are lanes for tight ends like Kittle, Laporta, McBride, Bowers. They are sort of a group in and unto themselves, in that they get the kind of target share and attention like we'd expect for receivers. And since it's a receiver spot, why discount someone just because they have TE in front of them? So I like that. Laporta. Right before you was Bo Nix. What do you think about Nix? And then Xavier Worthy just went after Laporta.
Yeah, Nix is another great option. I think he's shown enough with his legs that I can see why someone would want to take the upside swing on him. Where Dave did here in the 6th round. But again, for me, I don't have enough comfort or confidence to say that I would want that. Like I said, Burrow was literally the end of the tier for me, based on this format. But I can very much see Bo Nix being that option there. And Worthy's an interesting one too. It's who really knows who's going to be the one in that offense, and it's for any number of reasons, right? Like Rashee
Mhm.
Rice is running great right now, not in pads. They're saying mobility looks great from his injury. He does have some lingering off the field stuff that potentially um, could come in this year, but it sounds like more likely is going to be next year. At least that's the speculation. Worthy took over Rashee Rice's type of role. It's kind of all over the place. So it's really call your shot here at this point. And
Mhm.
so mid six like that feels like good value. He was in my queue. He was one I was hoping maybe made it back around to me. So I'm not against it. And then we just had Justin Fields go off the board. Another potential big upside swinging at quarterback. He's always been fantasy relevant as a starter, but
Mhm.
he's also not always been able to be a starter.
Yeah, yeah, I'm of the mindset now, given where we are, I'm a team with no quarterbacks yet. Uh, I will probably wait a little bit more because I feel like all the quarterbacks that you'd take from here on are likely guys that you're gonna need a second quarterback for to get stability out of that spot, unless you have, like I said, part of the reason why I lean running back so often is because they're the next most sure thing. I know
Mhm.
this is best ball, so we need some upside, and there can be some really heavy upside builds. But Fields, I think, is an upside swing, but he also, we've seen from his time in Chicago, he has a very low floor too. So a little curious to see Josh take him there, but I think it could end up working out well for him if because like you mentioned, Fields has always been very fantasy relevant when he's played, but in a format like this where you might only take one quarterback, Fields was probably not the kind of risk profile that I was looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, now that I'm looking here too, I wonder how much we'll see of it. Just talking about quarterbacks, I see Harms was able to Eric Harms here, are one of the good friends of the with the IDP show. Um, he was able to stack Daniels and McLaurin. Is that something you're looking to do? Like I intentionally look to break up your stack. But like, would you have done that if Joe Burrow was there at the end of the fourth? Would that have been something you considered? Um,
Honestly, I am anti-stack in this format
okay,
because the benches are so short, and the more stacks you have, that's also more players you have all on bye in that
yeah,
particular week. And I am trying to be at least a little bit cognizant of the buys. Like I have three offensive players with week 8 buys, so I know it's going to be a lower scoring week for me. So
hmm
if you're an offensive player that I like that has a buy in week 8, I'm probably going to be looking elsewhere right now because I want to make sure I'm getting points every single week. So stacks, I love the idea of stacks, especially
yeah,
in like an underdog kind of format where you have very deep benches to use. But in something like this with tiny benches and you have to think about the IDP you're going to get, I think it's a little bit trickier to play the stacks outside of maybe one, as long as you're cognizant of what's happening beyond that.
yeah. That's it. That's very interesting and very thoughtful. And I appreciate that approach. But I am of the opposite mindset, man. If it is talent is talent to me, I'm okay with you giving me a 0 one week, and even if that means I got 3 zeros that week, and maybe it sadly leaves me with a potential open starting spot. I'm willing to take that if I believe the talent is going to surpass what I could get elsewise, week in and week out from another position. So um, yeah, I'm it's fun. I love that we got different approaches here. You're on the clock now. I got to talk because obviously my boy, and I say that very loosely, but quarterback for the Houston Texans, CJ Stroud just went off the board. This is another one again where I'm of the mindset where I didn't think there was a lot of value left for quarterbacks. Stroud too is one that's been tough to realize that full value of from fantasy. I know he had some huge weeks his rookie year. Everyone got all excited. His ADP shot up. Kind of came crashing down to earth quite a bit last year, especially with all the sacks and injuries on the offense. So, not my favorite pick so far here. But you know what? I'm
Yeah.
also hopeful. Maybe the offense can revamp this year a bit.
I think that was an auto pick too. And
You're
whereas
right. It was.
I
Yes.
think Tripp auto picked, but I think he had set a queue beforehand because Laporta, I don't think is the default pick. Given there is that super flex spot, I think that's probably how Stroud got pushed up there. So hopefully, I think it was Noob. Yeah, it looks like he's already back. So he may have just had a technical issue. I am down to just 45 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and make my pick. I hate the Steelers, but I like drafting Steelers because when they play well against my Bengals, it doesn't hurt my heart quite as much. I think DK Metcalf is going to have a good year there in Pittsburgh. There's going to be opportunity. So he is, to me, a pretty high ceiling wide receiver. That's my 6th offensive player. I still don't have a quarterback. I do plan on taking quarterback. Seeing Fields and Stroud and Nix and Mahomes all go in this makes me consider it even more now, but I think I'm going to roll the dice, especially since you said you're not taking a second quarterback and none of our league mates are hearing this. I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to try to get a quarterback on the next turn, and I am going to go ahead and get a legit IDP. The guy I've been taking 101 in D-ups on Fast Draft anytime I have the first pick. Call it a homer pick because I've got some football cards of his right over my shoulder, but I am going to take Micah Parsons with that sweet, sweet dual desi, which matters to me a little bit more in this format with super short benches than it does with sort of the places where you have 20 spots to lean on. What do you think of my picks there? Tear me apart or just tell me how great I am. I'd prefer the latter.
Metcalf was, again, one of those last few. I'm down to 4 players in my queue, right, where I'm like, I'm considering one more offensive spot here. I mean, you can't go wrong with Micah Parsons. I mean, the underlying metrics in terms of his efficiency that leads to, production, always there. Last year was his first year injured. The team kind of was out of it, so I think they took it more careful with him, and so in doing that, he saw some of his lower volume totals of his career, but he's elite. He's the elite of the elite. I think no one would question you in any type of format putting him 101 in terms of IDPs. And the dual desi is just, that's the cherry on top, especially in such short benches. So he was number 1 on my board. And like I said, if I was hoping that kind of made it back to me, but is not the case. So I thought for a second you might have really hurt your heart and gone with the double Steelers there, right?
Yeah,
and gone with Watt, but
that thought crossed my mind after the fact, because I'll be honest, Watt is in my queue, and I don't see a world where he makes it back to me at 8-12, but he would be. I would take him at 8-12 in a heartbeat if I can stack Parsons and Watt. That would just be amazing. Not going to happen though, so I won't put too much time and energy into thinking about it. But yeah, I think Metcalf, I like to get more offense. I do like to have all my offense in place, but whenever I can have a guy like Micah Parsons, then that's one less thing for me to worry about in terms of my bench. So as it stands right now, I can probably be a little bit more offense heavy in my bench if I'm able to get other IDP like Parsons. We see another IDP going, I'm starting a trend. I'm starting to run. I don't know if it's going to help or hurt you because you're up here in a couple of picks, but Zaire Franklin, what do we think of Mr. Franklin?
Model of consistency for the last several years, right? I mean, unless you're in a format where it's a quarter point per tackle, this is one of the LBs you want. I mean, you can't ask for a safer guy. I mean, what Bond did last year was amazing, and he should be recognized for it, and he was in terms of he got a contract. I'm sure he's ranked high on plenty of people's boards, but I mean, again, Franklin's the guy to do this. And right now they got Lou Anarumo over there. You've seen him be nothing but deliver productive linebacker fantasy seasons for Bengals, for two primary linebackers. Franklin's going to step right into that lead role. He's going to continue to do what he does. I mean, it's the safest pick you can make at linebacker with the upside of being LB1.
Yeah, and you know how much I love linebacker early. So that's well established. And so I kind of cheated on that a little bit today, but I mentioned even on that episode, great episode last time. If you haven't had a chance to listen to it, Jake and I took different sides of the great LB DL debate, and I'm on the side of LB early. I still am, but I said there are exceptions to that. Like if you have one of the first couple of picks in an IDP only league, you take a Micah Parsons or a TJ Watt. I took Parsons, and we see going here with pick 3 in the 7th round, TJ Watt. I said there was no chance in hell he'd make it back to me at 8-12. So, I did just waste that breath. Watt's a phenomenal pick. If you look at the D-up ADP, he's often the second player selected in the drafts, if not the first. You look at our internal ADP for the IDP only or the couple of combined, he is one of the first IDP to go. So I think it's official. We're in a run. And if our boss Josh here wants to stay for the brand, then he'll be taking another IDP. But we'll have to. Yep. Good old. I thought it'd be Bond, to be honest, because I know how much he likes Bond. He may be hoping for him to come back around at 8-9, but TJ Watt, Miles Garrett, I think you'd agree you can't really go wrong with either of those guys, especially here in the 7th round. You're not giving up much great on offense at this point. There are still some offensive guys I like, but what do we think of these last couple of picks?
Oh, I mean, it's spot on with what we'd expect here. I think TJ Watt was the right pick over the other ones because again, to me, it's kind of all going to come out in the wash in terms of Micah Parsons, Watt, Miles Garrett, Max Crosby, Aiden Hutchinson, right? But again, with this particular format that we're talking about, with the finest of razor of margin to try and get this right, I love going Watt and Parsons first, but Garrett after that makes a ton of sense. Again, talk about a guy who does it year in, year out, constantly top for his game in terms of production. I mean, just absolutely perfect. Love to see it. So, and we see the run continue, right? It goes to Garrett, to Crosby, to Roquan Smith. Again, another linebacker who delivers us nothing but consistency there. So now this comes back to me, right? And now I had people in my queue, and now the run has happened. It has reached a point where I think it has passed some of that value and elite upside right there. So I'm going to go back to the well and offense one more time because there's a guy I believe can be a high end producer for us on the offensive side. And so I'm going to have to dip in my toe just one more time on the offensive side. And I'm going to go with Chris Olave.
Nice.
So, yeah, but I love all the picture beforehand. Those elite defensive linemen, Zaire Franklin and Roquan Smith, two guys who do nothing but give high-end LB production year in, year out. I mean, these are all great picks to build that out. These are people who are not going to have to worry about trying to find a ton of depth and or value at other points for these types of positions because they're just going to have a ton of it. They're going to get production 10, 11, 12 weeks out of the season from these guys. So now they can take, if they want to take greater swings at, a wide receiver, right? Oh, here's this potential high upside, wide receiver, or he's a very boom bust profile that can slot in elsewhere. Well, now you can use an extra bench spot for that because you have such elite defensive talent here coming through in the 7th round for us.
So before we get caught up with the next pick, did you consider IDP or were you okay? There was a tier break either at or before Roquan, or is this just the idea of zigging while others are zagging? Because in Olave, the IDP run is going to stop eventually. Because I'm assuming this is just going to be like those really elite IDP assets, and they're going to be back to offense. Were you trying to get ahead of that return to offense? Was there a tier break from you? Were you considering a Hutchinson who just went, or a Bond who I'm sure we're going to see pop up here soon, or somebody else?
Yeah. It was to be honest, it was Hutch and Bosa and Olave for me, right? Like those were the ones I was looking at considering. Hutch, I want him to return to full form because what he was doing in the
Yeah, I think he was on pace for something like 85 sacks last year before he ended up getting hurt. So, yeah, Hutchinson is just, if he can return to form, like you mentioned, then he would be an absolute great play. This next one has to hurt your heart a little bit. Will Anderson is gone. I know he wasn't mentioned there with the guys you considered, but I have to believe if it came back to you at pick 8-6 and Anderson was there, that would have gotten strong consideration from you.
Smash. Yeah. That pick would have been in half a second. He was one of those guys that I thought had a chance to come back around to me. Dual Desi, high upside, obviously the personal bias, right? Like I really, really thought that. So the second I saw that come through, I was like, well played, Chris. Well played. I know we're doing another startup with him right now in an auction one. I probably screwed him over somehow in there. So karma, come around, all that, blah, blah.
Yeah. and don't think I didn't notice that you started off that auction by nominating 4 Bengals players to drive up prices and make it difficult for me to get too many of them. But another guy that you mentioned just went Nick Bosa. I think Nick Bosa is in that elite tier for me. So he would have been someone who I didn't consider him at 101 just because I think Parsons is better, but I think Bosa has a higher floor and a almost
Yeah.
identical ceiling.
Yeah.
So, I can't fault the Bosa pick here. And Bosa as what is he now, about the 8th IDP taken, feels like good value. And so far, we're seeing a decent matching of something like D up, which we probably expected a little bit because that's very short benches too. It's 4 starters essentially, and
Yep.
the 2 players that are going to be on your bench in a given week. I think it's going to be interesting to see how things play out there. Let's see, another running back. I mentioned, and you mentioned too, how Aaron Jones was kind of the last of that likely workhorse running backs. We see the best, arguably 1B running back in the league, and David Montgomery go, and then a couple of linebackers at the turn. I'll turn it over to you for a little bit to talk about what you think of TJ Edwards and Fred Warner going here at the turn.
I mean, Fred Warner, again, another model of consistency in terms of high-end IDP production for us over multiple years, right? I think he always intrigues me because he has not given us a ton of like LB, 1, 2, 3, 4 type seasons, but he's always LB 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like 15, in that range, right? And again, for a format like this where you can say, okay, I have an LB position, he's always going to be there. I'm always going to see 10, 12, 14 points with some spike weeks. I mean, again, how can you not want that to balance out your roster? And TJ Edwards had a bit of a down year last year, but what a fun story he always was from, I think he was either an undrafted free agent or a super late pick, right? And really made a name for himself with the Eagles and parlayed that into some great play with the Bears here as well. But again, a little bit of a down year last year. I think he's primed for a bounce back. So him going in the top end of that range, not super against it. I think, I like someone like a Zach Bond, I think would
Yeah,
probably be
with
a
Bond still on the board, I was
yeah,
surprised to see, and it was the turn, so I'm sure Warner was ahead of Edwards too. I would have to imagine,
right.
in reality, but yeah, I think I like Edwards, but again, I don't question the hitting linebacker twice at the turn, because if there is a run on linebackers, a guy like TJ Edwards is not going to make it back to you. I think he is that second tier of linebackers for redraft or best ball, but it's still an awesome tier to be in. And it's not very deep by my estimation. So I like going linebacker. I probably would have been more in terms of Bond, but I think TJ Edwards, like you said, he's a model of productivity. The Baker Mayfield pick hurts because he was one of those quarterbacks that I thought about taking to get to a pretty reliable quarterback when I was at the 6-7 turn. But he's gone. I only have one more mine to dodge at 8-8 in terms of another team that might possibly take quarterback. We see Jared Verse go after Baker Mayfield. I like the doubling up on high-end edge rushers. And now we see Zach Bond. So that Will Anderson, Zach Bond, that's a hell of a start to the IDP side of the ball.
Right. And I was so hopeful. I was like, maybe Bond makes it to me, right? Like I would love for that opportunity. Unfortunately he did not. But yeah, what a great pick at 8-4. Yeah, Jared Verse is a great story too in terms of his rookie year. And you want to talk about someone strong underlying metrics and potential case to make himself, a top 10, top 5 defensive line this year for IDP production. I mean, there's a very real path for that with him. Good friend of the show, right? John Macker, I think, just did his D-line stuff recently, and he sung his praises about Verse and all the measures that he has in his model to determine that. So check him out too if you want to see, in greater detail what it is. But yeah, I mean, at that point too, right now, DJ Keltown stacking Bosa and Verse for 2 DL spots there. I mean, you're talk about loading in a stud in your defensive line spot throughout the entirety of the year. And then, like you said, one of them swinging into the flex pretty consistently too. So,
yeah, and we had a flurry of picks there too, and you were one of them. So why don't you talk a little bit about the pick you made at 8-6, and especially in relation to the couple of guys that went before and after, as we see the offensive well being tapped in once more with George Pickens. as my queue is very, very rapidly being depleted, and I'm realizing I should have prepped more to get ready for this. So talk a little bit about your hunter pick and what happened immediately before and after.
Yeah, so right before me, I had Caden Ellis, was someone else that if Hunter went, that was who the pick was going to be. So I was very, very okay with that value there, because I was thinking one pick later would have been just fine too. Caden Ellis, high upside. I think Jeff Olbrock did great things in New York with the Jets and their linebacking crew this last year. So I think we can see more of the same for Caden Ellis from what he was last year. Maybe not the same spike weeks. I guess I haven't looked at the numbers well enough to say confidently he's going to get the same number of pass rush opportunities, but probably would be a crime to not utilize Caden Ellison that way in Atlanta. So really, really like the pick there, especially when you got Hutch in front there. I went with Daniil Hunter. So dual Desi. Hunter's one of those guys who, the guy's been doing it forever. I'm very excited about his production still. I think he can be probably, I don't think he's not going to make a case for defensive line one, obviously, or probably in that top 3, but he's a guy that has a very, very strong likelihood of, top 12, top 10 is within his outcome, and getting that dual Desi spot there. Very, very happy with that. After grabbing Chris Olave, my last offensive choice in the round before. But then we see Nick Bolton go right after. Bolton is he's polarizing, right?
Yeah.
Some people are like way out on him. Some people are like, well, he's massively undervalued for this. And then, sometimes he kind of settles right somewhere in the middle. And to me, it felt a little high for me. But if there's someone who knows defensive schemes and utilizing players, it's Tripp, man, and that's who took him and had him in his queue here. So I struggle to say it was a bad pick. Just not a pick for me.
All right, I am on the clock, and I've been bleeding the clock a little bit because the picks have come in fast and furious. I have 2 guys left in my queue. I've been at 2 guys left in my queue for a while now. I had all of the elite IDP assets there for me, and I told myself if they were gone, then I was going to leave the IDP waters for at least a little bit. They are gone now because after Bolton, we did have a couple of offense, George Pickens and Juwan Jennings. But then we had AVG go. I love AVG. I love him in best ball, especially. A little bit nervous about how the rotation is going to end up shaking out because you don't draft Dallas Turner to not play him. So I think the repeatability of that is a question. So I'm going to use my first pick here and take Jared Goff, one of those highly reliable quarterbacks. It allows me to be more aggressive with either a second quarterback late or just more high boom bust kinds of offensive players as well. I'm going to stick in the offensive waters here because I have exactly 1 player left in my queue, and he is an offensive player. I think he might be one of, if not the last wide receiver ones for their team that's left. And I know there's some real questions and concerns about the particular offense that he's attached to with a rookie quarterback. But we've seen Calvin Ridley do it before. I have to believe we're going to see him do it again. So I'm going to double tap offense here. If the IDP run continues, that's fine. There's a lot of IDP names that I would be happy to get if it gets back to me, or when it gets back to me, because we know the draft is going on for a few more rounds. I'm going to go ahead and take Ridley here. And then we see another DB go. So you only have to start 1, but the data when I did all those D up analyses showed that if you get the right DBs, you can have a pretty high scoring team. So what do we think of the stack there by Noob to get Brian Branch and Kyle Hamilton, arguably the top 2 DBs in most of the drafts we've been in?
Key phrasing, you said it, and I think it aligns perfectly with these picks. You said, if you get the right 2. I don't know how any more right 2 there is than Brian Branch and Kyle Hamilton. Guys who have, they're very early in their careers, but they have consistently delivered for IDP production. Branch has shown a phenomenal totality of a season already for us. Hamilton has been a little more, I don't want to say boom or bust, right? But just lacked maybe some of that season-long consistency that we'd love to see at times. Some of that may be due to situation of the team, injuries, and adjusting things and moving them around. But I think, you saw with them drafting Malachi Starks this year, they know they need to be able to put Kyle Hamilton in certain spots, and now they have a Malachi Starks to lock down one aspect of that defense. Brian Branch and Kyle Hamilton should feast this year.
Mhm.
I was so close to considering them, coming up here. And you know me, I very much love to push DB into the later rounds as much as possible. But I was like, in this format, right? One DB making that difference there would be kind of fun to have a Brian Branch or Kyle Hamilton there. So they were strongly in play here, coming back here for me at 9-7. But those are really the ones that I was looking at. So
Yeah, and
probably
I
going to go
think
down the board for me.
the late round DB strategy works really, really well in redraft where you're starting like 2 corners, 2 safeties, or best ball where you can just take 8 of them at the end of the draft, and you know that in any given week 4 of them are going to ball. In this format, this is probably the one position where I'm the most scared of runs in, because if all of the good DB talent gets dried up, then you're going to have to take a couple of wild cards to make sure that you're going to have any points going there. When you take someone like a Branch or a Hamilton, then you can kind of rest easy and you get a second one just to make sure that you have someone to fill that DB slot. Having both means he's probably set. And if the Winfields and the Derwin James of the worlds go before too long, then it's going to be a lot of that. All right, where do we really go from there? Are we confident that Buda Baker is going to do what he did last year, and he can be that locked in guy? It's kind of like I was talking about that second tier of linebackers where it feels kind of thin. That top tier and that next 1B tier of DBs is also kind of thin for me. Love the Josh Hines Allen pick that came after Kyle Hamilton, another big high upside swing. He's now got 3 really elite pass rushers, so he's in for some big weeks. Let me see who that was. Oh, it was Harms. So that makes sense. Harms knows what he's doing, and he probably has some of that hubris that he's going to be able to get some good linebackers later on, or he could be doing a really fun build where it's a bunch of dual desi guys and he's just going to bank on booms for his LB slots. One of the fun things about this format, by the time it's all said and done, and we hopefully do a dozen or more of these throughout the off season, we're going to see some really, really fun data and some really, really fun builds. But you are on the clock, and I just heard you groan, and you're wiping your eyes. I'm guessing that means was it Greenard or Jones that got you? Greenard, I
No,
would guess.
it's the opposite. This is
Oh,
this is a windfall, but because of the potential strategy here for me. I can't believe he's still here on the board. So I just, out of respect, I'm going to pick him immediately. Trey Hendrickson,
oh yeah,
still available,
yeah.
and I don't. I mean, now I'm locked in. That's a defensive line only player, but when was the last time he finished like, I don't know, like in the top 1 or 2 in most IDP scoring formats? Oh yeah, it was just last year. I mean, Trey
Mm-hmm.
Hendrickson was amazing. There's no way he doesn't play, and I can't imagine he's not playing on the Bengals this year. I mean, talk about an ultimate bungle, if you will. I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
We've
yeah.
heard
Right.
them all plenty of times before. No,
No,
I
but
think that is so far it's the steal of the night.
I
I
couldn't believe
think
it.
Hendrickson's profile is very similar to Hutchinson's in
Mhm.
terms of what he can do and the uncertainty that's around it. We all know Hutch is going to play. We wonder if there's going to be a slow start. We know Hendrickson's going to play. We wonder if it might bleed into 1 or 2 games of the
Yeah.
season or something like that. So that might have been what was kicking him down some boards. It could have been people just were flying by the seat of their pants and didn't build a deep enough queue, kind of like I did. It was like, oh man, Hendrickson's still there. So very, very well done. And that's not just me saying that as a Bengals fan. I think that's so far that is the steal of the night, because he is a first round pick and D up, and you got this. This is essentially getting Hendrickson. I'm not going to count them all off the top of my head because that doesn't make for great viewing or listening. But this is essentially like getting Hendrickson at probably like 208 in a D up draft, and that would be unprecedented. So very, very well done. But now that I'm done singing your praises. That's it. You've gotten your cookies. Dan Henley, the next player drafted after Hendrickson, going back to the linebacker position. Very, very heavy IDP this evening. What do we think of Henley, and then Benito, another dual desi guy who has a lot of that wonderful upside. So a nice, again, I know he's a buddy of mine, and I'm not trying to butter him up when he listens, but Anderson, Bond, and Benito feels like another really nice way to start the IDP portion of your draft.
Right, and yeah, and Metal Dave right before that, Hutch, Ellis, and Henley, right? So you're talking
Hmm.
he's got an anchor DL for sure there in Hutch, and then high upside with Ellis, a guy who delivered high LB1 production for us last year, and Henley just another model of consistency. We won't talk about championship week for those who rostered him, me. But other than every other game, the other 15 games we had of him, phenomenal. So again, yeah, grabbing him there too locks down um one of his IDP flexes week
Hmm.
in and week out. I mean, that this is smart. This is exactly what you talked about in your your LB heavy type of draft or your LB early type approach. You want to load up all your flexes as much as possible, even in larger formats with those linebackers. I mean, doing that here is the same exact thing. And
Hmm.
I'm just now seeing Chris Godwin go off the board. That's actually a sneaky good pick. That was a
Yeah.
miss on my mini Q buildup as well. So nice play by DJ Keltown there, and Nick Benito too. Just another guy. I mean, what like 9 weeks in a row with sacks last year, and the underlying metrics to support that that's not a fluke.
Hmm.
Yeah, just another great value there. Late in the ninth here.
Hmm. Yeah, and since this is best ball, there's no waivers, so it's not like he can start to blow up and then you pick him up and then you're doing great. I remember having Benito in one of my DL streaming articles that I did last season. So, he's a great pick. I agree. His underlying metrics were all good, and I think that. Yeah, Benito was a good pick. Godwin, another Penn Stater, so I'm never going to complain about that. Coming back from the injury, but still, when he plays, he's elite. I went ahead and paused the draft because I promised the guys we'd just do 4 rounds live, so we wouldn't be keeping them attached too much on this wonderful holiday week. But what do you think of these last couple of picks? I said we're going to stop at 9, but there were a couple of picks that came in really rapidly here at the end. I kind of love this super LB heavy
Yeah.
build because now you know that your LB spot and your 3 IDP flex spots all have an awesome floor. So
Yep.
I'd imagine he's going to take some huge upside swings. I could see him going like really DB heavy, or some of those DL only guys moving forward. And again, it's fun to see these different strategies starting to play out in real time.
Oh, 100%. I mean, and look at, like you said, because of how narrow the scope of the roster is, right, or the team build is. I mean, you look at some of the names that are out there for DL still.
Hmm.
There's guys out there that I wouldn't be upset if they were my DL1 in other formats, let alone this one here. I mean, obviously, do they have the same upsides as some of the other anchor DLs that we've seen that elite play? No, but darn if these guys aren't people that can very easily sneak into the back end of LB1 for us. And
Yeah.
if you can pair that with freaking TJ Edwards, Fred Warner, Foye Lucan, Bobby Okereke, like
Yeah,
I mean,
that's pretty sick.
that's when you're like, oh, my worst linebacker is Bobby Okereke and he's my LB4. Like, really? Come on.
Mhm.
So no, it's a super fun build. I love the Q he's built out for himself and what he's done with it there. So
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that was a fun way to end it. And I also think we did a great job, not to pat ourselves on the back too hard here, but
we were.
starting this part up in the 6th, because we gave no instructions to people about, hey, this is IDP draft, so we need you to draft some IDP.
Yep.
We just had sort of that feeling that the 6th round is where you're starting 6 on offense. You might start to see some go in the 6th, but you're going to see a ton of IDP action in 7, 8, and 9. And we saw just that. So much so that, I got Parsons in the 7th, was really happy about that. Saw the IDP tier break because I forgot about Trey Hendrickson, which I will never live down for as long as I live. But forgot about Hendrickson, saw the tier break, took offense, and look, it's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 IDP have gone since then. I've got a few guys who I would still be really excited about as some of the core members of my IDP squad. I still have only one now. One linebacker that I have in that, high end tier 2 of linebackers that I'd love to get. There's a couple of DBs that I would consider just so that I don't have to worry about that too much. Given you have a pick coming before me, I would rather not say more than that. But what are your thoughts on tonight, what we've seen, what you're thinking long-term for the draft? I'll write down player names as you mention them so I can maybe swipe them from you. But what are you thinking, Jake?
I mean, this format is amazing. Again, great job putting this together. I'm like, I didn't realize how sucked we got into it, and you're all of a sudden you're like pausing, and I'm like, why are we pausing? I want to keep going. It's just it really pulls you in because there's so much strategy to it. You have to consistently be on your toes and looking at this. I can see this being almost more enjoyable in this type of format with short timers, right? When you're doing like a live draft type of format. Just because that you're constantly like your brain is firing on every synapses possible, trying to figure out what strategy you want to pivot into next based on whatever runs happening. But even in a slow draft format, this is going to be great. I love it. I love the flexibility of it. Yeah, like I said, like I was all pumped about myself. I was ready to pat myself on the back. Kind of did a little bit on Trey Hendrickson. What a great pick. But then I'm like, oh wow, I completely whiffed on Chris Godwin. Like that would have been someone I would have considered at 7-7. And here it is at 9-10. I get like injury and stuff, whatever, but like he was on pace to be wide receiver 1 last year before his injury, right? And everything is pacing in the right direction for them. Mayfield's back, blah, blah, all that stuff. Like no, this is great. Yeah, and looking at this here, I really want to get into linebacker. I really want to get an anchor LB that I feel great about week in and week out. But there's some people that are falling again, and I'm like, I don't know what to do here, right? So it's format. It's super fun. Keep listening, guys. We're gonna keep. I'm pretty sure we're just gonna try to keep cranking out this new format here as much as we can in the off season. So be listening to Scott and looking for Scott on Twitter or wherever else, right? On the idpshow.com. Like we're gonna have all this information out there. You guys need to get in here and try this. It is a blast.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to share this draft board so we can see, because we still have, I was just looking, one team that even picked in the 10th and hasn't taken an IDP yet. So it's going to be really, really fun to see what his IDP squad looks like at the end of the draft, to see how viable that is. And of course, the viability of a strategy is always going to be contingent on the people you're drafting with and the strategies that they're using. And you always have to be able to pivot in any kind of fantasy football draft, auction, whatever it might be. But I think it's going to be really fun. I'm excited about this. You mentioned these are still slow drafts, but they're not as slow. So we've picked up the pace a little bit, where you have a 2-hour timer instead of the 4 that we had before. Between that and the fact that they're only 18 rounds, it keeps people engaged. It keeps them wanting to pick. So a lot of times it very much has that live draft feel, where you'll have a 2-hour timer. But I think when we fired up the draft, we had the first 8 picks in within maybe 10, 15 minutes, because people are excited. And I love doing deep drafts too. I love showing off my fantasy knowledge and my IDP knowledge and all of that, for getting my, Aleem McNeils and BJ Hills and Noel Williamses, all these guys at the end of drafts. But there's something that is really fun about the D-Up contest, in that you're drafting all household IDP names.
Yeah.
And that keeps you really engaged. And I think that we're trying to thread the needle here, where you have somewhat of a bench, but you're knowing all the people you're drafting, and every pick is really consequential. And yeah, I agree. It's fun. I would not recommend doing it while you're hosting a show, because that's a whole other kind of pressure. And I am always going to just blame the fact that we were doing this on me not getting Trey Hendrickson. The fact that you got him and you were doing the same thing, we'll just ignore that. But yeah, this was an absolute blast. Really grateful to the group of drafters that made some time in their evening to do this with us here. But like Jake said, we're going to be firing these up throughout the offseason. Last year, we didn't launch our first combined best ball until 4th of July. This year, this is our third. This is our first of the new format. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if these drafts take less than a week. And so we might be able to really start firing them out, have a lot of fun. One of the other things we didn't mention, just from simplicity, because we hope that this is gonna really take off, is these are winner take all. So it's a $5 buy-in. So you win, you get $60. You lose, there's always the next draft. So
you lose with 10 other people, so you
you
have that
lose with,
solidarity.
yeah, you lose with a good group, usually with the drafters that we get in the room. So please come draft with us. If you're listening or watching this on the 4th of July, as you're getting ready for the 4th of July, happy 4th of July, happy birthday, America. To our international listeners, come visit for a 4th of July, because it's an amazing sight to behold. Hopefully everyone listening has all their digits at the end of this and has a good time. I hope you have a great party tomorrow. I plan on doing the same on Friday. And for all of your IDP needs, as Jake mentioned, please visit theidpshow.com. For fast drafting, do D Up by Fast Draft. It's about 75% full now. So I think if it gets full here before too long, they might do another one that may be the same, maybe different. We don't know. We don't work for them, but we love to see them succeeding, because, as I said, the IDP Dynasty Reddit, a rising best ball tide lifts all IDP boats. So go give D Up a try. We have a promo code where you can get some entries for your deposit match, IDP Show. Check it out. I feel like that's all the promoting I can do. Jake, anything you want to say on the way out?
Nope. I mean, you nailed it. There's so much great stuff out there. We just need you great folks to jump in with us and enjoy it. So with that said, we will see all of you in the draft room.